Well, forget that Inauguration Day promise of unity. President Biden, again, going on the attack, this time mocking supporters of the Second Amendment yesterday.
For those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe, if you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking. Think about this. Think about the rationale that's used to provide this, and who they shooting at. Shooting at these guys behind me.
And this is why he goes to bed early. Brett, I just can't. And simple rule, don't use American citizens and F-15s in the same sentence as the commander-in-chief. Simple rule.
Well, it's just this continued gaffes from him and falsehoods. You know, he was talking about how an AR-15 bullet shoots faster than any other round that exists. Not true. He was talking about how an AR-15 just chops people in half. Any veteran knows that's not true. It's about precision from that weapon. And it's just these continued lies that you know, he puts out there. And look, I think it definitely has a direct correlation with these ridiculous policies with the rising crime rates, right? Democratic cities have some of the largest rises in crime rates across the board. People feel confident right now in basically breaking the law. And it's these talks that he gave in this recent speech here that talk to that. I mean, you know, you want to take away our guns, you know, ask the Ukrainians. I was just in Ukraine not too long ago and asked them if they should have taken away their assault rifles before there was this surprise attack on Russia. Our gun laws in the United States are the reasons why we're protected. It's the reason, a lot of times, why we're not attacked. And we shouldn't take that away at a time that we need them the most.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Jackie, I can't help but watch some of the things he says and think that this president thinks he's running against half the country. I think he really thinks he's in a presidential campaign right now, and his opponent's not Trump, it's not DeSantis, it's not whomever. It is half the country. It's the semi-fascists, it's the F-15 people. He's running against America.
Right. And basically, what's so interesting to me, I keep saying this, is he did not win in a landslide.
No.
It was so close in so many of the, the key swing states that he needs to be really careful. Not that I'm trying to give him advice here, but he needs to be really careful about how he gets up and he presents himself. Alienating half the voters in this country is not the way to go about it. To Brett's point about the Constitution, the Second Amendment, the framers drafted that to give people the right to bear arms so they could protect themselves exactly for that reason, so they wouldn't be oppressed by groups trying to, take too much power, to usurp too much power. And so this isn't really about hunting. It's not about accidental shootings. It's not about school shootings. It's about trying to enforce laws that make gun users, holders, people who attain guns, safer about it, making sure they stay out of the hands of people who are mentally ill. The answer isn't just take away the guns. It's so much easier for him to say that. And of course, the progressives would like to do that. I can only guess why. But having said that, you can't do that. And you have to speak, Mr. Unifier. You have to speak to the entire country, realizing that half of them do respect the Second Amendment and they want it. So what's the middle ground? Why can't we find that solution?
Yeah, we don't have a president who seeks that, it seems. But we do have some words of wisdom from Joy Reid, or Joy Behar, actually. I get him confused. Let's go.
If Joe Biden, who's the most middle-of-the-road, pro-police, working class, inoffensive, purposefully inoffensive politician of his generation, is painted as an extremist, and Donald Trump is considered almost a Jesus-like figure for people in the MAGA world, how much danger are we in, really?
That was Joyless Reid, not Joyless Behar, but nevertheless, Cassie.
I mean, you just wonder how can people keep it on those channels for that long? Because you say it's joyless, it's hard to watch. But I also think just generally, it's hard to watch Joe Biden start talking about how he cares about crime and public safety now, after we've seen incident after incident go unanswered from this White House. We saw Kamala Harris encourage her supporters to give to the bail funds after the Minneapolis riots. And that's what we're remembering. Again, these are our backyards where we're seeing this lawlessness take place. I have to live in D.C., and our mayor and our city council, they do not support the police. The police know that. Their rules of engagement are don't do anything, hands off, because it's going to be too much paperwork. And that's a problem. That's why everybody just says, well, I guess it's fend for yourself now, because you can't count on anyone, even people who want to be helpful. They are not allowed to be helpful because of these Democrats who have chosen lawlessness and have chosen to support lawbreakers instead of law abiders. And it's become a really tragic scene in so many of our towns.
Yeah, Morgan, tomorrow night we have these primetime remarks from the president. I wonder if last night's disastrous rally is a preview, if he's going to go full-on campaign, and what should be reserved for a policy-oriented address.
I hope it's scripted, based off what I saw yesterday and the comments there. And I guess we'll see what he says tomorrow night. Would love for him to address the fentanyl crisis that we talked about in the first block. If he wants to talk about guns, how about talking about harsher penalties for criminals who commit crimes with guns? That's one of the things we never hear about with guns. As Cassie just said, you talked about fending, the sense of fending for yourselves. There's 14 million new gun owners, first-time gun owners in the country, most of them rising women. Right, it's a very diverse population. I think people have a sense because of rising crime, civil unrest, lawlessness, the lack of respect for the police. People are choosing to be more gun owners in this country. So if we really want to talk about guns, let's talk about what's affecting so many people in major cities in America, which is crimes that are committed with guns. Let's have harsher penalties for those guys.
Yeah, and he just continues to just attack these Republican voters. He just goes right after the voters, and that's not going to change the state of the economy. It's not going to change the state of the rising inflation. And instead of just attacking these voters individually, he's to focus on the things
well,
that
it's
that
political,
care about most.
right? We're in
It's
a
about
campaign
votes.
season.
And
so.
speaking of politics, so, well, Jackie, you can answer this if you'd like. Reuters has out Biden approval falls, holding near low end of his presidency at 38%. So all of the Aviator Joe, the rising phoenix, the media's comeback story seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, he has nothing to talk about with respect to accomplishments. So what he's going to try to do tomorrow, I think, is really just to deflect, and that's all that he can do. And it's really unfortunate that we're in this position. Again, it's keeping the guns out of the hands of the people who misuse them. That should be the messaging, and yet he can't seem to do it. I mean, you see how he's speaking on the stage. He can't get it right. You hope he's scripted or whatever the case may be. This cannot be somebody who runs in 2024. I just can't see it.
Well, I think he's going to. Take me at my word on that, or take him at his word, we should say.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.